Welcome back, everybody. A quick little break. Hope you guys got your legs stretched out and ready to go. Looking at those poll results on what's most effective to actually prevent injuries on your site. Zach, are you surprised to see strong supervision and leadership as number one?
You know what? Honestly, from that choice right there, I think it's a great option. I can definitely see as it the number one reason. But I'd like to highlight a comment there by Bob Watson in the chat box where it's a combination of all of them, and he's absolutely right. It is a combination of your supervisor and leadership practicing what they preach, holding everyone up to a higher standard, and making sure that they're looking out for everybody, but as well as making sure that their team members have the proper training so they know how to identify and bring it up to leadership. And then finally, it's also having the training and the worker experience along the background, of course, simply guiding all that program together down the line incorporates not only yourself or a team, but also other companies around you. Because when one company is held up to a higher standard and operates at a higher standard, it brings the entire program or the entire site and the whole industry up to a higher standard.
Totally agree. And as always, in safety, that continual improvement with that core audit and making sure that all of our processes have those positive outcomes that we're striving for within our safety programs. Now, that being said, let's get on to our next presenter. Next, we have that presentation on dropped object prevention and exclusion zones with our very own SCSA Advisor Stephen Spock. Stephen is an NCSO and advisor out of our Regina office. He focuses on enhancing member safety programs through a practical, experience-based approach. So let's please give a warm welcome to Stephen Spock.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to join our session. I'm Stephen Spock. I've been an advisor at the SCSA for 3 years, and for the decade previous to that, I worked as a plumber in the construction trade. Today, we're going to talk about dropped objects and exclusion zones, and more importantly, how to prevent objects from falling and injuring someone on the job site. Dropped objects are one of those hazards that everybody in the construction industry understands. We've all seen tools slip, materials shift, and debris fall from overhead work. Even though the risks are well known, dropped objects still cause many injuries across the construction industry every year. The purpose of this session is to look at some common situations where dropped objects occur and discuss practical ways we can prevent them. This isn't meant to be theoretical. Instead, we're going to look at real practical applications to prevent things from happening on construction sites in Saskatchewan. We'll talk about where dropped objects come from, and why even small objects can be dangerous, and how things like weather, poor planning, and improper supervision can make the risk much worse. Finally, we'll look at some of the resources available from the SCSA that can help companies strengthen their safety processes. So first, we'll look at the hazards. Dropped objects remain a leading cause of serious injuries in the construction across Canada, including Saskatchewan. Construction work often involves multiple trades working at different elevations at the same time. When materials, tools, or debris fall from above, workers may have little warning and very little reaction time. In Saskatchewan, construction workers experience hundreds of workplace injuries each year, and when many of these involve what safety professionals call struck-by incidents. These include situations where workers are struck by tools, materials, equipment, or debris. Dropped object incidents are particularly dangerous because they often happen suddenly and unexpectedly, and a worker may simply be walking through a work area and unaware of the danger above. Under the Saskatchewan Employment Act, employers are required, as far as reasonably practicable, the health and safety of their workers. This includes identifying hazards like falling objects and implementing controls to protect the workers. The detailed requirements from a workplace safety are outlined in occupational health and safety regulations. These regulations require employers to identify hazards, control risks, and ensure the workers are protected from these overhead dangers. The key takeaway is that most dropped object incidents are preventable with the right controls in place. So what are we looking for? When people think of dropped objects, they often imagine something large, like a beam or a pallet of material falling from a crane. In reality, the most common objects that are dropped on a construction site are much smaller and more ordinary. The items such as power tools, hammers, wrenches, screws, bolts, and measuring tapes are often dropped regularly during everyday work activities. These items are commonly used when workers are operating on scaffolds, ladders, aerial lifts, or elevated platforms. A worker might set a tool down on a railing or a ledge while adjusting something else. Another worker might carry several tools while climbing a ladder. Sometimes tools are simply placed near edges where vibration or movement can cause them to be knocked off. Okay, because these items are used consistently throughout the workday, they're often overlooked as potential hazards. However, a fall from a height, even with a small tool, can become extremely dangerous. Recognize these everyday objects as potential dropped hazards is the first step to preventing the situation. Small drops can be big dangers. One of the biggest misconceptions on construction sites is that small objects are not that dangerous. However, physics tells us something very different. When an object falls from heights, gravity can cause it to accelerate as it drops. The longer the fall, the faster the object is moving when it strikes the ground. Even something as small as a bolt or a wrench can reach significant speeds when dropped from scaffolding, a crane, or upper levels of a building. By the time it reaches the ground, a small object may strike with enough force to cause serious injuries. Injuries like head trauma, deep cuts, fractures, or other serious harm, especially if the person below was not expecting it to fall. In addition to injuring workers, falling objects can also damage equipment or materials or even property. For these reasons, construction sites use a number of protective measures. These measures may include securing tools, installing debris nets, tow boards, or ensuring workers wear personal protective equipment. Now, while PPE does provide some level of protection, the best protection is preventing these things from falling in the first place. Saskatchewan weather can be a serious factor in the danger of falling objects. In Saskatchewan, weather conditions can make things very difficult on a construction site. Construction projects often take place in challenging winter conditions. Snow, ice, and freezing temperatures can significantly increase falling objects. Snow and ice can accumulate on scaffolds, platforms, structural steel, and building surfaces. As temperatures change and workers move around the site, these buildups can become dislodged and fall to the ground. Cold weather can also make tools more difficult to grasp. Workers may be wearing thick gloves that reduce grip strength and dexterity. Frost or ice on surfaces can make platforms slippery, increase the likelihood of tools or materials to fall off the edges. Strong winds, which are common across the prairies, can also shift unsecured items, especially material bundles, up at high heights. During formwork operations, ice or frozen debris can get trapped in the forms and fall from the forms when they are moved or removed. Similarly, the aerial lifts or structural steel, frost and wind can cause materials to shift unexpectedly. Because of these conditions, winter work in Saskatchewan requires extra planning and awareness to prevent falling object hazards. Where things can go wrong, most dropped object incidents don't happen because of a single mistake. Instead, they usually occur because of several small problems coming together. Some of the most common contributing factors include poor tool management, lack of planning of overhead work, exclusion zones either poorly established or not enforced properly. Another common issue may be people refer to it as "it'll only take a minute" mindset. When workers believe a task will only take a short time, they may decide to skip certain safety steps. These issues are not complicated problems, but they can quickly create dangerous situations if they are ignored. The next few slides will explore each of these factors and look at practical ways to address them. Poor tool management. Poor tool management is one of the most common reasons tools get dropped on construction sites. When tools are not properly stored, secured, or organized, they can easily be knocked off ledges, scaffolds, or platforms. Workers carrying several tools while climbing ladders or moving between work areas will also accidentally drop them. In some cases, tools are left near edges or placed on unstable surfaces. Vibration from equipment, movement of other workers, or even strong winds can force those tools to fall. Good tool management practices help reduce these risks. Workers can use tool belts or pouches to keep their tools secure and organized. Tool lanyards can be used to tether tools to a worker or an anchor point so that they cannot fall when dropped. Keeping work areas organized and removing loose debris also plays an important role in preventing dropped objects. No planning of overhead work. Failing to plan overhead work can create serious hazards in construction sites. When tasks are performed above other workers, tools, materials, or debris may fall from elevated areas. If crews are working below and not aware of the overhead work taking place, they may unknowingly enter a dangerous area and not know the risks that they have exposed themselves to. Proper planning of overhead work involves identifying the hazards in advance and implementing the controls before the work even begins. This might include establishing exclusion zones beneath the work area, installing barricades or warning signs, and ensuring tools and materials are properly secured. Planning also allows crews to coordinate their activities so that workers are not operating directly below whenever possible. Elimination is always our best bet. Effective planning is an important part of complying with Saskatchewan occupational health and safety requirements and protecting the workers on the site. Poorly enforced exclusion zones. Exclusion zones are designed to protect workers and the public from hazardous activities. However, exclusion zones are only effective when they are clearly established and properly enforced. If barricades, warning signs, or physical barriers are missing or ignored, workers may accidentally enter areas where hazards are present. Someone could walk underneath scaffolding or a crane operation and not know that they have exposed themselves to this danger. This significantly increases the risk of injuries from falling tools or materials. Properly established exclusion zones should include clear signage, visible barriers, and clear communication between workers and supervisors to make sure everybody is aware of their existence. Workers should understand these zones exist for their protection and should always respect the boundaries that have been set. The "it'll only take a minute" attitude. The mindset can be very dangerous on a construction site. When someone believes a task will only take a short time, they may decide not to secure tools or set up barriers or follow certain safety procedures. Unfortunately, many accidents occur during these quick, unplanned transitions. For example, a worker might place a tool near the edge of a platform while making a quick adjustment. Moments later, vibrations or movement can knock the tool off the edge. Even though the task seems small, the consequences may be serious. Taking the time to follow proper safety procedures every time helps prevent incidents and protect everyone working on the site. Properly securing tools and materials is one of the most effective ways to prevent dropped object incidents from occurring. When work is being performed at height, tools should never be left unsecured on ledges, railings, or platforms. Even a small bump, vibration from nearby equipment, or a gust of wind can knock an unsecured tool off the edge. One of the most effective controls is the use of tool lanyards or tethers. These systems attach a hand tool to a worker's belt, harness, or secured to some kind of anchor point using a cord designed to hold the tool's weight. If the tool was to slip from the worker's hand, the tether will prevent it from falling to the ground below. Workers should also use tool belts, pouches, or storage containers to keep their tools organized and to secure them while moving around the site. Carrying tools in pockets or loose in the hands increases the risk of dropping them, especially when climbing ladders or accessing different levels of the building. In addition to securing tools, materials should be stacked safely and kept away from edges. Toe boards and guardrails should be installed whenever possible to prevent the items from sliding or being kicked off of the platforms. Good housekeeping plays an important role. Keeping a work area clean and organized reduces clutter, removes loose items that could become falling hazards. When these simple controls are used consistently, the risk of dropped objects greatly reduces. Planning overhead work. planning overhead work is essential to protecting workers from falling objects and other hazards. Before work begins, supervisors and crews should identify that any task that will take place above ground level may include work on scaffolds, aerial lifts, structural steel, roofing systems, or formwork. Once overhead work has been identified, the potential hazards should be assessed. Workers and supervisors should ask questions such as, what tools or materials are being used? Could anything fall from the work area? Or are there any workers operating below? Based on this assessment, appropriate controls can be put in place. One of the most important controls is establishing exclusion zones beneath the work area. Barricades, warning signs, and clear communication should be used to prevent unauthorized workers from entering the area. Planning also allows crews to coordinate their work so that other workers are not directly underneath them while performing their job. In Saskatchewan, weather conditions can also be considered, or should also be considered. Snow, ice, and strong prairie winds can increase the risk of materials shifting and falling from elevated areas. Proper planning ensures that everyone on the site understands the hazards that are present and how to mitigate them properly. Establishing proper exclusion zones. Exclusion zones are one of the most important tools for protecting workers from dropped objects and other hazards. An exclusion zone is simply a clear, defined area where access is restricted while hazardous work is taking place. These zones help ensure that workers and the public remain safe. The first step in establishing an exclusion zone is to identify the hazard area. This may include areas beneath overhead work, cranes, lifts, scaffolding, demolition activities, or material handling operations. Once the hazard area is identified, the boundaries of the zone should be clearly marked. This can be done using barriers, cones, temporary fencing, guardrails, or caution tape, along with visible warning signs of the area. Only authorized or properly trained personnel should be allowed in this exclusion zone while work is taking place. Communication is also very important. We need to be able to communicate with the workers on site where these areas exist and why only certain people can be in them at a time. Regular checks should be performed throughout the day to ensure that the barricades, signs, and boundaries remain in place and continue to provide effective protection. Supervisor checks are also another tool that we can use to make sure that these zones are respected. Regular inspections allow supervisors to identify hazards before they result in an incident. During these walkthroughs, supervisors observe the work activities and check whether or not safety procedures are being followed. They may look for hazards such as unsecured tools, improperly stacked materials, missing barricades, or workers entering exclusion zones. These inspections also provide an opportunity to ensure that the safety controls such as signage, barriers, or protective equipment are in place and functioning properly. In Saskatchewan, workplace inspections are an important part of meeting the requirements for the OH&S safety regulations. Regular monitoring helps ensure hazards are identified and corrected promptly. Supervisor walkthroughs also create an opportunity for communication. Supervisors can speak directly with workers, answer questions, and reinforce safe work practices within the site. Consistent inspections help maintain a good, safe work environment and reduce the likelihood of accidents. Now, what is a good versus a bad practice? When working at heights, the difference between good and bad safety practices can have a major impact on the worker's safety. A good example of safe practices is using tethered tools. When tools are attached to the worker and secured to an anchor point, they cannot fall to the ground if dropped. This is a simple control that could prevent many dropped object incidents. Good practices also include keeping work areas organized, inspecting equipment before use, and maintaining awareness of the hazards around the work area. Workers should also avoid overreaching for tools at height. This can increase the risk of losing control of the tool or yourself. In contrast, poor safety practices increase the likelihood of incidents. Examples of bad practices include carrying loose tools in a pocket, placing tools near edges, or working at heights without any drop prevention system in place. Even small tools can become dangerous projectiles when dropped from a height. By following safe work practices and using proper equipment, workers can significantly reduce the injuries caused by falling objects. Now, barriers versus caution tape. Proper barricading is an important safety measure on a construction site because it creates a clear physical barrier that prevents people from entering hazardous areas. Strong barricades such as temporary fencing, guardrails, or rigid barriers provide a visible and effective control. These barriers may make it clear that the area is restricted and physically prevent workers or the public from entering these dangerous zones. Good barricade practices also include installing warning signs, ensuring barricade is stable and secure, and regularly checked that it remains in the right place throughout the workday. Caution tape, on the other hand, is often only a visual warning. It can help draw the attention to the hazard, but does not physically prevent anybody from entering the area. Caution tape can be easily ignored, moved, or damaged by the wind or equipment. When used by itself, it may create a false sense of security without providing real protection. For these reasons, caution tape should generally be used as a supplement to proper barricading rather than its only form of protection. Clear signage and access control. Warning signs help communicate hazards to workers, visitors, and members of the public. Signs should be easy to read, clear, visible, and placed at entrances or near hazardous areas. Common signs may warn of overhead work, restricted access, required personal protective equipment, or other hazards on the site. Access control is also important. Construction sites should have clearly defined entry points where workers and visitors may enter the site. These entry points may include gates, fencing, or other security controls. Visitors should sign in and receive a site orientation so that they are aware of all the dangers that are on the site. When access is not properly controlled, unauthorized individuals may enter dangerous work areas without necessary training or protective equipment. Clear signage and proper site access controls help ensure that everyone on the site understands the risks and follows the required safety protocols. Now, I have worked on sites many a day in my life, and there is a personal experience that I had that kind of relays right into the topic we're speaking of. I was working at a site years ago where there was some work being done on the top floor, and the exclusion zone had been marked out in a hallway on the floor that I was working on. Now, this exclusion zone was clearly marked. They were coring through the floor, and it was a 16-inch cement floor, and the man was coring a 4-inch hole, so a very large piece of concrete that he was knocking out of there. Now, because the man was working alone, he was relatively new to the construction field and didn't understand exactly what he was doing. He had marked out the exclusion zone improperly. While there were 3 workers standing on break in a hallway about 100 feet from the exclusion zone that had been taped off, they thought that they were out of danger's way. They thought that they were clear and safe, and they were simply on break speaking to each other in the hallway. Now, when this core finally came and let go of the concrete, it dropped from 20 feet above them and struck one of these gentlemen in the head. Now, this was a very, very serious injury, but thank goodness that man did still have his hard hat on. So he was seriously injured, but he did not die. He was able to get back on his feet after a while. But this shows just how inexperience, improper supervision, an incorrectly marked exclusion zone, and a person using a tool not quite understanding how it works can all culminate in a very dangerous situation that caused a worker to be injured. And if he had not been wearing his hard hat, if he had not been wearing that personal protective equipment that he had been issued because he was on break, he didn't need to. Thank goodness he did, though, because that could have resulted in the end of his life right there. A 30 to 40 pound piece of concrete dropping 20 feet on top of his head. So it just goes to show that when we deal with things like a construction site, even a man who has gone and used the proper protective equipment, or I guess I shouldn't say proper protective equipment, but the proper exclusion zone, he thought he was doing it correctly. He just misjudged where this piece of debris was going to fall, And the guys that were on break thinking they were in a safe zone, even though that zone was clearly marked, were all still in a very dangerous situation that could have ended in a far worse outcome. So I just want people to know that while we do have these things in place, even when we do use them all, if they are used improperly, it can result in a very dangerous situation and serious injury of a worker. Now, I'm sure there are other people who have worked on construction sites and dealt with similar issues, so we know that the danger is real, so we have to use these tools and these safety protocols to keep ourselves out of harm's way as much as possible. So what can we do to help ourselves? What tools do we have available to us? Construction companies in Saskatchewan have access to many resources that can help them strengthen their safety programs. One of the most important resources available is, of course, the SCSA. This is what we do, this is what we love. The SCSA provides guidance, education, practical tools to help our construction companies develop and maintain effective safety programs. It all starts with the advisors. Handsome, charming, extremely smart people, a lot like me. These advisors provide both on-site and virtual support. They review safety policies, procedures, and documentation to ensure they align with the industry's best practices and provide safety requirements. Advisors also help identify potential hazards within the company's operations and recommend practical solutions to reduce risk. While they work closely with employers, supervisors, and safety representatives to strengthen safety programs and improve overall safety culture. By providing guidance, coaching, and practical support, the SCSA Advisor helps companies build safer workplaces and improve their health and safety performance. Training, forms, policies, and procedures are another tool that is available at the SCSA. These courses cover important construction safety topics such as hazard recognition, fall protection, confined space awareness, supervisory leadership, and incident investigation. Training is available in both classroom settings and online, making it accessible for companies across the province. In addition to training, the SCSA offers practical resources such as safety forms, policies, and procedures that companies can use to strengthen their safety programs. These resources include hazard assessment templates, inspection checklists, incident reporting forms, toolbox talk materials, and they can be adapted to fit different types of construction work. Providing these ready-to-use tools helps companies save time while ensuring their safety programs remain organized and effective. And site inspections, another tool that we offer. Another valuable service offered by the Saskatchewan Safety Association are worksite inspections. During these visits, SCSA advisors review work environments, observe ongoing tasks, and identify potential hazards on site. While they may look for issues such as improper equipment use, fall hazards, poor housekeeping, or missing safety controls, the purpose of these inspections is not enforcement. It is instead designed to provide education and support. Advisors work with supervisors and workers to discuss safe alternatives to help companies address hazards before incidents occur. This proactive approach helps companies continuously improve their safety practices and maintain safety on job sites. The main takeaways I want you to grasp from this session are that there are many things that we can do to keep people safe on site, but the most important ones are training, making sure our workers are trained properly in their job and the safety procedures and protocols that they need to do it safely, communication between crews, between workers, and certainly between workers and supervisors to understand what's going on the site at all times, supervisors making sure that they respect their role and going and doing supervisory checks to make sure safety protocols are being used and proper equipment is being operated safely, and of course making sure finally that all the rules of the site are followed every day, all day, to make sure everybody goes home in one piece and no incidents occur, especially preventable ones.
Awesome. Good. Stephen, thank you so much on that. I couldn't agree more though.
And that's my favorite.
Amazing. I just, as soon as you said it, I just went, oh. Stephen, if it's okay though, I got a couple questions here for you. Just
Absolutely.
your presentation. In just kind of jumping back to that personal incident that you had on site there with the concrete there. What were some like the warning signs or like say near misses that might have occurred before the serious injury? Was this like a breakdown in just with the workers, or is this like a multi breakdown in communication?
Uh, definitely a multi factor scenario type of thing. Basically, what I was when this happened, one of the biggest issues was the gentleman that had been assigned to do the coring. One had never used a coring tool before that day. He literally got taught that morning. And obviously, he had been tasked to set this up, run a tool that he was unfamiliar with. And he was I believe he was either a first or second year apprentice in the trades at the time. So didn't really have the experience and wherewithal to understand blueprints and readings, which is why that exclusion zone was so far away from where it needed to be. And thirdly, a supervisor had assigned the task to him, told him he needed to get this job done. If at the end of getting prepped for the job, the supervisor had come back, checked the exclusion zone, checked that the tool was being used properly, it could have prevented that. And he could have said that that exclusion zone was way to the left of where it needed to be. So he could have done that check, making sure that a lesser experienced employee had the checks and balances in place of a supervisor taking an experienced eye look at it and saying, okay, you've done it how I asked, except the measurements are off or the dimensions that we've gone through were off. So just making sure we double check, especially apprentices work, people who don't have the experience to quite understand what they're doing.
Okay, no, fair enough. What about like say the exclusion zones? Is there like dimensions that you need to meet, or is there like a specific formula or like guideline that our members can abide by?
Well, there are no specific dimensions, just because exclusion zones, when we're setting them up, it vastly differs in the amount of space you need depending on the work and the hazards that work can cause. Such as if I say was pouring some wet cement and I need an exclusion zone to keep people from traveling on the cement until it sets, I just need to put a boundary around all the cement that is wet to make sure people understand, don't step on this, you'll leave some boot prints and it's not going to be a good thing. Whereas if I'm, say, doing some demolition work on a 5-story building and I have scaffolding along the side of that building at 5 stories, a drop from the top of that scaffolding, say it be a tool or, God forbid, a pallet or something coming off of the building when we're demolishing stuff, that could be a much further fall and therefore kind of making the exclusion zone need to be much wider just in case we have ricochets and things that are flying off when they hit the ground. So depending on the dimensions that you're looking for, you have to understand what work is going on and how far the danger can be, depending on the amount of force behind things that are falling, and obviously the things that are falling. Say like a pallet falling from the top of a scaffolding, it's going to get that explosion kind of thing when it hits the ground. Whereas if I drop a tool, I mean, it's still a dangerous thing, but it's not going to be nearly as dangerous as a pallet that might be several hundred pounds.
I know, couldn't agree more. Just with a couple more questions here on a lot of the larger sites here, we have on a lot larger sites, we have a tendency to see a lot of companies on sites, both ranging from say plumbers, electricians, to scaffolding, to framing, all go on one site. Is there like a when multiple trades are working simultaneously at different elevations, what communication protocols and coordination meetings should be in place to manage, say, dropped objects?
Well, certainly one of the biggest issues that you're coming across when you have multiple people working, especially on big commercial sites, that, again, like I was speaking in the presentation, should be firstly addressed with communication. The GC on site should definitely have at least kind of a semblance of a safety meeting in the mornings, or at least when the work starts, to explain what is going on, understand where people are going to be in the line of fire or be in danger of incidents happening, seeing if they can reschedule people who would be working below, if there is a different job that might be able to be done where they are not in the line of fire, maybe scheduling that for the day that overhead work is going on. And, just making sure that we have a clear communication. And then, of course, the supervisors or anybody doing the work, setting up exclusion zones, making sure that we have tool nets or tool tethers, anchor points for anything like massive equipment or big pallets of materials, to make sure that we are mitigating as much of the danger as we can, to make sure that nobody's going to be in harm's way if something was to fall, or preventing the fall entirely.
Okay, no, fair enough. Stephen, we got a question in the group chat here of what were the root causes of the incident you presented, and what were the associated costs, and what preventative measures should have been implemented to avoid this from reoccurrence?
Okay, well, that's a great question. So basically, the root causes, as I stated before, were we had a young worker who was inexperienced in not only the tool that he was using, but in setting out an exclusion zone. He was left to his own devices to get this done. We didn't have a supervisor come back and check his work, because he did know that this man was inexperienced. I know that for the company that I worked for, which I won't name here, we were fairly understaffed, which is why the supervisor wasn't able to kind of get around. It was a very large site and there was a lot of people working. So, under supervised workforces are also a danger when we don't have enough experienced people on site to make sure they're going around and doing these supervised checks. The associated costs, well, obviously the gentleman that got struck, I'm sure there was medical costs, because this was a very serious injury. Not only the medical costs that he would have to go through in order to, treat his injuries and things like that, but the time off of work, I would imagine, would be very significant with the kind of injury that he sustained. The gentleman that had caused the incident, I do know that he was let go that day, and even just reputational damage that would have been done to his career could be significant as well. So those are things that you have to look into when you're talking about associated costs. And then obviously the preventative measures that could have been implemented to avoid it, making sure we have supervisor checks, making sure that we're training our people in the tools before they need to do a job with them that day. Maybe taking him out, explaining what goes on, understanding the tool. Maybe the gentleman didn't even know that when you are coring with that cup saw, it's going to let the debris go once you get through the floor. I don't know if he was explained that too. So again, training, communication, supervisory checks were the things that would have made that incident not occur.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. And thank you, Mohammed, for that question. Steve, we also got another question here in the group chat from Matt, which is, does the SASC regulations have a requirement for tow boards with guardrails, even on, say, scaffolds?
Yes, especially if there's work being done on them. If it's strictly a walkway where it's like an access point, it is much less preventative safety implementations are needed. But if you are doing work where materials, tools, and workers are going to be on that and off of that doing things, where you do have debris and secondary stuff coming off of your construction, you do need to make sure that you have tow boards. Guardrails need to be a certain height to make sure people don't fall off of scaffolding or any kind of walkways. And we need to make sure that we're looking into this. And this is, again, one of those things that if a company had questions about this, they could certainly call the SCSA, and that's what we are here for, to inform them and educate them on all the stuff that they need to do to be, legally viable in the construction industry, and making sure that we're preventing any injuries from occurring, or as many as we can.
Okay, absolutely. With the question kind of just dealing with more towards, like, say, the culture on a construction site or in a company, is how can supervisors and safety leaders address it'll only take like a minute mentality? What would you recommend are some of the best tools to dealing with that kind of a mindset?
Well, that one is a tricky one for sure. There's always going to be people who tend to think, and I know my fellow SCSA advisors that are here today understand that we've gone on many a site. We'll find somebody who isn't taking the proper safety precautions, and they say, I've been doing this for so long and I've never been injured yet. I always kind of look at that in the sense of, I've worked in the construction industry for a decade. I've seen people drop tools. I've seen people smash windows out of cars by accident, by dropping a tool off of a roof when they weren't paying attention. culture is a big thing that we like to foster in the safety industry. We make sure that people understand that. So things such as toolbox talks, safety meetings, OHC meetings in companies where people can address the issues that they might have on site, voice their concerns as the way things are going, or certain policies that are in place, and making sure that we understand that the safer we are, not only the better does the company run, the less injuries we have, the less time off. We make sure that we take care of our people and they understand that that is our focus. And if you're taking care of your employees, they're going to feel much more secure at work and much more appreciative to the job that they have, to make sure that they're doing a proper job for you because you're taking care of them.
Perfect. Stephen, I want to thank you so much for answering these questions. If anyone is interested in reaching out to, say, Stephen, myself, or anybody else in the advisory team here in Regina and up in Saskatoon, please feel free to come visit our website and check out the advisor page. You can book a site visit or consultation to get help with your safety program and get custom advice. And it's at no cost to anybody in the SCSA membership, okay, which is anybody in the B11 through 13 rate code. We're already working for